Okay, team. Welcome to People Smart Skill number 3. Jeremy and I here to discuss this with you. The unfortunate part of discussing this with you is that People Smart Skill 3 is asserting your need.
Something that is not my strength by any means.
Our dubious romantic careers would say that.
I had to go there with it.
I believe we could find witnesses that would certify in a court that we are not good at this.
I could pack the house there.
So, we're in the textbook, page 71. The opening quote for the chapter is, "Since people cannot read minds, you must tell them what you want." And I have here a tobacco card, 1920s. It's the Rock of Gibraltar, because even, so important, because this is how I've tried to be.
Okay.
I've tried to be the Rock of Gibraltar. So this sits in my office to remind me of this particular People Smart skill. During the pandemic in therapy, my therapist has been all over me about this, and I know she's right. I'm not good at this.
Well, you and I hit on it immediately, but the first step, what do they say? The first step in correcting a problem is recognizing you have one.
Yep.
I've always recognized this being a problem of mine.
It
So
is.
step one hasn't been taken.
The text starts with, "You can't be all things to all people. If you try, you wind up disappointing them. That's because others will come to expect too much from you, and you're bound to fail from time to time."
I would add, you end up being no things to all people, attempting the former.
My advertising professor in grad school said that the everybody audience is the nobody audience. When you think you're reaching everyone, who you're really reaching is nobody. And the problem is, I have a deep desire to help people. I have a deep desire. Students will, and I will try and do everything I can for them. But then at some point, you become this dehydrated kernel of yourself, right? There's only so much of you.
Working for a lot of elected officials that I had, I used a statement impromptu. You can lead or you can appease. You cannot do both.
Yeah.
And in any type of leadership position, there's going to come a time where you're going to have to make a decision and say, this is what we're going to do. And some people aren't going to like it. And the same can go in all aspects of life, as a student or as a teacher, and so on. You're going to have to at some point say, this is what we're going to do.
Yeah.
And wanting to help everybody is far from a fault. But you're wise enough to know that there are those, one, you can't help, no matter how hard you try, but then there's those that will take advantage of the fact of knowing your willingness to want to be that person. There's a very fine line with navigating those waters, I've found.
I have also, this may be true for you as well, I have also not been known to submit well. Like, I don't think that anyone close to me would rate that as a strong skill for me. Not exactly germane to this, but related. And my boss down the hall today is a lovely woman named Teddy Davis, and Teddy is a very kind, compassionate, loving human being. But she will crook this finger at me occasionally. And a few months ago, she called me into her office and said, they asked me for you to be on, I don't even remember what it was now, a particular committee, and she said, I knew you'd be good, and I told them no. And I said, okay, yes ma'am. She said, because someone has to tell you no because you can't.
Wow,
And I thought, oh, wow, that got deep. Like, that was like 0 to 60 in a very short period of time, Jeremy.
but allow me to brag on her for being an effective leader in that, situation, because from a leadership standpoint, you have to learn to say no. You have to have the ability, and I failed miserably many anytime. This is not gonna be a face of the nation moment. We are so similar in this regard. There's gonna be point and no counterpoint in a lot of these instances.
It's, I needed her, and she said, she's very specific. She said from now on, in regard to committees, everything goes through me if you want to do one. So for our recruiting, for our admissions director, which I felt like was a pretty significant role, I said, hey, I think I should do this. And she said, okay, that seems good. But I will just run that tank until there's not a drop left. And I mean well, I really do, I think, Jeremy, I mean well,
Oh,
but.
I totally relate. But I mean, we have an audience of students who are most likely in their first or second semester that, you know, they're in college, there could be some excitement and they want to get through this. They can also take on too much as well.
Sure.
There can be class, I remember.
Right.
One of my high school classmates that went here initially with me, I forget the number of hours, but it was just, it was like, you're gonna have bad grades in all your classes, even what you're good at, because you're gonna stretch yourself so much. And again, that's something you can carry on in the workforce later in life. You can do that as a parent, as a, you know, so on and so, as a spouse, which I shouldn't be giving any advice in regard to being, but.
Nor I, but,
yeah, there is at some point where you have to limit yourself so you can be effective in what you're doing.
The textbook identifies on page 75 the need to be decisive, that non-assertive people are fuzzy about what they will do for others and what they want from others. And while that's probably a very true statement, I'm just not sure how exactly helpful it is. Because in moments where you're not sure what you want, you know, it's like if I tell my son, who deals with a fair amount of anxiety, to calm down, it's about as helpful as a hole in the head, Jeremy. I mean, that's, you know, obviously in that moment. And so to say, to be decisive and, you know, be more clear or whatever, but if you're not sure, if you're not confident, I think that's hard. On 76, the author talks about separating needs from wishes. I had a friend a long time ago that I worked with in ministry, and he got shirts made, and it said, keeping the main thing the main thing. And I grew up in northeastern Ohio. I grew up in farm country, cattle country, milk, like dairy farming country, and had a good friend who was a dairy farmer, and he said to me as a 15-year-old young man, he said, Ryan, I don't know what's going to happen, except I know I'm going to milk the cows every day. Make sure you milk the cows. Like whatever else happened with the crops and whatever else the weather did and whatever else happened in there, there was this need to keep the main thing the main thing. And I think that has been difficult for me to separate needs from wishes, because my personal viewpoint is always to be thinking about the other. How can I be helping that other person? It is a foreign concept for me to think, how can I let them help me?
And do you think it's a stretch to say a person, you know, using the milk the cow as an analogy, which is a little comical in a sense. Can you become complacent in keeping the main thing the main thing?
Sure.
You're talking about kind of an abstract, I'm always thinking about something other than.
And so I never get around to thinking about what this textbook is talking about, right? I never get there because my focus is out there, and it's laying right here at my feet, but I'm not doing anything about it. And I think this is probably, for a lot of folks, maybe the most important chapter in the text. I think some of the others are easier to maybe break down and think about, you know, let's take these steps. I think for some of us, like for me, this is just sort of a conundrum, like where to start. Past admitting, and it's taken 50 years for me to really admit, I know this is a problem. I have enough experience. And then the second step, according to the textbook, which I don't know anything about, so I'm just going to go ahead and put that on this video, is to take a stand. Now for you, Jeremy Clark, I have taken a stand. I will take a stand. It's Not a problem.
but for yourself. Yeah. I said once upon a time, again, being in politics in a sense, I'm great at selling this person.
Yes.
I can sell.
Yes, sir.
the
Yes, sir.
You know what, out of you.
Yeah.
But selling myself, I'm a little more apprehensive. It's just way out of my comfort zone.
I don't like to get awards because
No,
an inherent nature of the award is someone's going to put a spotlight on me.
Right.
Send it to me in the mail. Don't call me up front. I don't want to do it, Jeremy.
And on the other hand, though, I will stand in that spotlight for hours on hours explaining why you should.
Talk about other people,
Right.
but if you
You're
put
great at
me,
that.
if you put me right here,
Right.
and Dean Davis comes out and gives me an award, I'm like,
Yeah.
I shrivel.
I'm the best campaign manager
Oh my
you
gosh.
can find.
Yes, sir.
Not the
Yes, sir.
candidate. Not the candidate.
So I think the text maybe is right. I don't know that in teaching this class I have any street cred whatsoever in talking about that you ought to take a stand once you figure out what your needs and your wishes are, and then to communicate your position. And
Well, I disagree in this sense.
Okay.
What I said in the very beginning.
Yeah.
I think that being aware of a problem gives you
Yes.
credibility. Because even though the ability and the know-how and, the confidence to say, this is my Achilles heel.
Yeah.
This is what I'm worst at. Yeah, to me, that's credibility. Because
Well-
you're aware of it, I'm aware of it, and becoming aware of it, to me at least, is the hardest step.
yeah.
And and like it is with a lot of situations, the first one's the hardest one. Recognizing your faults is a very difficult
Oh, it's
thing
hard.
for all of us.
It's hard.
And you and I happen to share this one, so.
Then communicating, how does the textbook say it? I went away from it. Communicate your position. My therapist in Cersei is a very sweet woman. She's very kind. But she sometimes gets what I call angry. And so she looked at me in the middle of therapy. And she said, "You cannot be vulnerable." I bristled at that, Jeremy. She said, "You don't know how."
Okay. So it wasn't
It wasn't a "you can't do
Right,
this."
right,
It's
yeah.
"you're not." Basically, what she was identifying was you
don't have the ability to be.
You could, but you're not.
Right.
And I looked at her and I said, "That's a very angry thing to say."
Yeah, a little bit.
And she said, this is not her style, but she said basically, "Tell me I'm wrong." Well, I don't like to lie. I don't like to say anything you can't sign my name to.
It's not the
Jeremy.
place you want to lie. To be honest, I don't know what you're paying for it, but that's
So
the
I had
place to be honest.
I had to say, well, yeah, you're right. And so she laid out some, I'm improving on this area to at least, I am not able to do these three things in this order, to separate that, to take a stand and communicate my position. However, on your line of something is better than nothing and admitting the problem, I am improving at stating, but this is where I'm at.
So you're able to be honest enough to recognize your position, even if the direction you need to take from there is the.
May not be clear, and I may still not be able to really decide, is that a need or a wish, or, and there's a fundamental question for me that comes before that the textbook doesn't recognize how hard of some cases out there. The need for me, the question first is just, am I allowed to have needs or wishes? I don't ever think of it, Chairman.
And do you, and this may be just me, but exhorting a lot of energy to prevent yourself from being in a certain
Absolutely.
position. Yeah,
Actively avoid putting
Yes.
yourself in
Well,
those
and
positions.
being self-aware, again, the importance of being so great to be self-aware. I can recognize that in a lot of cases, 3 steps from, and
Yes.
I'll just not get near it. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'll stay so far, and I'll work hard to stay away from it.
It's the
And
same.
it's been, caused some problems.
It's the same thing. You come in my classroom, I may very well do some kind of active learning with you. I might do something that causes Now, if I'm sitting in a class and I smell you're gonna do active learning,
Yeah,
me and my bag have exited stage
Completely
right, and we're
changed,
gone.
yeah.
We're gone, because I don't wanna do it. And the same, and it's sort of the same principle, that, you know, to do those things requires things of me
sure.
that are difficult. I mean, I don't wanna say impossible, because I don't think they're impossible,
No,
but they're
it-
real difficult.
But to me, it's detachment. You just immediately detach.
That's what I do.
Yeah, it's like,
Check out.
like skiing and you see the, you know,
Yeah.
buoy coming. You're not gonna wait and try to dodge it. You're just letting go and you're done.
So,
Right? And you're gonna fall where you fall, you know, in metaphorical sense.
on 83, if you're following along in the textbook, there's a section that has also been big in my life. My therapist during the pandemic also asked me, what's your intention?
Yeah. It's a good question from a therapist.
I was like, what do you mean? And she said, well, what are you going for? What are you trying to do? The text will talk about what is my goal. And I think goal is a word that sometimes we can't hear it anymore. It goes in here, goes out of here, and we're done.
Yeah.
What is my intention? What is it? I may not reach the goal, but where am I aiming? What am I doing, Jeremy? What am I trying to achieve here?
What do you expect out of?
Absolutely. What do I want from you, from Jason, from others? What am I? You know, from my students? What is my intention? Well, my intention has been to be the Rock of Gibraltar, and at 51, I can promise you, it does not serve me well.
Right.
So this is up daily to remind myself, don't do that. And I think it's a fairly important little, it's only like 4 paragraphs in the text, but what I've had to do is, during the pandemic, I found out that even though I'm an extrovert, everybody thought I'd die during the pandemic being at home. And I was like, now I don't know if that's a function of age, Jeremy. We're not 20 years old anymore. I don't know if I could have done it then. But now I'm real good sitting. Like I've achieved a skill here, my man. And
I don't sit still well. I'm a homebody, so it didn't affect me in that way so much. But when I'm home, I'm doing something.
well, I mean that. I don't know that I'm sitting still perfectly.
Well, I mean, you know, in more of a textbook sense, what and maybe I'm a little off base on the intention part, but that to me, the first thing I thought of was, man, that's almost a good question every day.
It is a
I
good
mean,
question every day.
What's your intention?
For today.
For every day. And
Yeah.
I was, you know, first I thought of classroom setting. You know, students in the classroom, what is their intent? Well, probably most of them would answer, well, I want a degree, such and such and such and such. But I found, especially coming back, and as more of a, you know, middle-aged adult, you know, classes, man, the experience of classes now at this age and this, you know, stage in my life is a world of difference.
Yeah.
From my experience back then. Because back then, you know, I was at that age, you know, I was a teenager and there was a girl sitting 3 desks away. And my focus was on so many more things than really what I was there for.
Yeah.
The college experience, for what you and I had, and you know, we're close enough in age, the college experience was probably
Pretty
relatively
similar,
similar. It's so different now. I got interviewed for an article. They were doing the non-traditional student thing.
Yeah.
I got asked to answer some questions, and you know, the digital was, you know, they asked me what was the hardest and most, all of the digital things. So I've had to put so much of my focus on students
Yeah.
being 41, 42, on learning the digital, making sure I don't miss out on something because I didn't
Yeah.
know the app to check, didn't know. Heck, I'm in the 1 percentile at this college when it comes to,
Yeah.
to my intention, and so to speak,
Yeah.
is to make sure I don't miss out or lose because of something I'm so unfamiliar with. It makes sense?
Yep.
As opposed to, you know, a 18, 19, 20-year-old student here today, that's second nature.
Yeah.
Now, their intention may have been me, or
Yeah,
you know,
right.
as opposed to making sure the social aspects don't get in the way of
Sure.
what they would tell you their intention is being here. As much social life as kids have now with all the social media,
We,
et cetera.
I said sit still, and by that I don't mean I'm sitting perfectly still. I meant I stayed.
No, I got it. Yeah.
I didn't run around, right?
Right.
Like, I wasn't on this.
You're far from a butterfly.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't on this, exercise wheel that I couldn't get off of for the first time. So I was able to ask things like, what am I really going for? And I think every day is important, right? Like, today may be a little bit different than yesterday or the next day. What am I intending to do? I may not reach it. It's one of those things.
Oh,
Do you
I
do New
just-
Year's resolutions?
more
Everybody
days,
says
yeah.
no because I don't keep them.
Right.
All right. Well, maybe we need to break it down smaller. Maybe this is really a problem for you, asserting your needs in relationship. And if you're like me, then it's just kicked your backside, right? And you went to therapy to attack some of that, right? Like, my intention is to improve at that. Like, every day there is an intention to be more vulnerable, to do what this chapter is advocating for. But it doesn't become, I've not found in a year and a half it became easy or natural, but it's still my intention. And some days I don't make it. I'm not vulnerable. I pull back because.
Sure. Well, and I would argue that what you're talking about being, your need to be vulnerable and to experience that, to me, it reminds me of a conversation I had with my son about you can't avoid certain, I will stay out of this situation that I see 3 steps down the road.
Sure.
But the truth is that if I put myself in there as uncomfortable and as bad at it as I feel I am, it would be good, it would strengthen me to be better the next time. I told my son, you can't avoid every conflict.
Yeah.
If you do, you'll never learn how to
Sure.
deal with a conflict that you can avoid. Kind of the same aspect. I mean, putting yourself in these uncomfortable situations will sharpen you. I was kind of thinking, you were talking about pandemic, we're talking about people smart.
Right.
Well, we had less contact with
Yeah.
people than at any point in our
Yes.
lives. I know for a fact. Well, did you lose some of that sharpness, did you find? Probably in a
Little,
sense.
yeah.
In a sense. Now we're kind of getting back out into the open. At our age, probably just more of a fine.
Yeah.
But what about for someone 15? What about my son's age? Who had difficulty with people's
So,
skills to begin with.
absolutely,
He just
right.
had a year and a half of none, essentially.
My daughter's going to be a junior.
And they're
She got pneumonia 2 years ago, right before the pandemic. She was out.
so she was out.
And then just trying to come back in, pandemic hit.
Yeah.
2 years of high school gone, she's pretty nervous to go back
Sure.
this fall for the exact reason you just said.
Yeah.
She's not been people, really, in
No,
2 years,
Completely understandable. And, there's going to be a lot of apprehension and fear that wouldn't have been there otherwise.
Yeah. Oh,
It's
yes.
the same with my son.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to pause for a moment. I'm going to tell you something that I think the text is wrong about. I'm going to say this especially if you're a male. If you're Jeremy and I, and we rank up together, we put about 100 years on this earth together. It's a little heavier on my side than Jeremy's side. On page 87, it talks about 3 techniques worth considering to really be persistent. The first one is remind. I think that's okay if you're reminding yourself. And they're going to talk here, they're not really talking about that. They're talking about reminding others. I think you've got to be real careful about reminding.
Like in our day and time especially, where people are very defensive. Very defensive.
And I think if you come at them reminding them,
I think
whereas
taken the wrong way more times than not.
the other 2 are request and encourage. I think those are, I think it is.
A little more acceptable socially.
Well, I have found in this effort to be vulnerable, it starts with, I will say, like, this is going on, and so can you and I invite them into whatever that is, right? That seems to be received well. None of my efforts to remind my children, spouses, colleagues,
Certainly.
students don't listen to me when I remind them of stuff, Jeremy. It's just, nobody wants to be reminded if I'm avoiding it. You know, every once in a while, somebody would be glad for a reminder. I set a reminder on my phone or something.
Well, in our last class, we talked about talking down to.
Yes.
It's a form, people take it as a form of being talked down
Yes.
to. It's almost, how dare you think I would remember that? It's a belittlement. And yeah, and you know you don't intend it that way, but having the knowledge that it's likely to be received that way is probably in your favor. So I agree 100%.
So the end of the chapter, pages 90 through 94, are some exercises for developing your assertiveness. I'm going to tweak it a little bit for our class. That's what I would like to ask. Pick the one of these that is hardest for you and conduct a little experiment. So, if your issue is being decisive, pick an aspect, just one thing. How do you want to be, what do you really want here? Choose it. I'm not saying you have to choose it for all time. What is your intention today? What is that?
I had a sergeant, and then maybe this will help someone. I had a sergeant that just was scared to make a decision. Couldn't stand to be, the thought, again, trying to avoid the vulnerability 3 steps down the road, wouldn't make a decision for fear of being called on the carpet after the fact and being told it's the wrong. And I set this one down, and this person's probably 15, 20 years older than me. And I said, look, I would rather you make a wrong decision than no decision. Just make a decision. That's why you got those stripes. That's why you get the extra pay. That's why you're there. You're going to make wrong decisions. I'm going to make wrong decisions, but we're paid to make one.
Yep.
So you can't have the fear of not making one. So yeah, decisiveness, it's important in a lot of aspects.
We have hurt ourselves, I think, by our generation and down. I don't know about above us, but by teaching them to go for the one right answer. Like in every exam in school, we are trying to produce this, to get them to regurgitate this answer. So what I get as a theater director are these students who come to me, and they want to get it right. Doing theater is like putting footprints in snow that's evaporating because it's warming up, and in a few hours the sun comes out and they won't be there anymore. There's not. We're here together and we do this thing, and what I remember is what I remember. It may not have been what happened, right?
Sure.
And so I don't know that there's a way to get it right. And so I start when they first, in just another month, they'll be walking on campus, we'll have a retreat. First thing I'm going to say to them is, take a risk.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is, don't just give me the line, but come in here and do something bold that you think might actually be too much, and then let's play with that. Our Student Government Association president for this coming year, Reed Donovan, kept trying to get it right, and I kept preaching, take a risk. And he was in a class, and he took a risk. He was sitting right about where you are. And I was on the back row, and I ran screaming down, came up the steps, clapping. Reed took a risk, went all the way back around the back. And he really didn't know what to do with me. But it was because I needed him to take that step. I didn't care what it was.
Just needed decisiveness.
I just needed you to decide to make a decision, stick with it.
Yeah.
Don't. And so maybe that's the one for you.
Same concept as what I was describing with the supervisor. Look, you're going to make mistakes, but just show me you can be decisive and make a decision. I would rather you be
100%.
wrong than indecisive.
Second one that I didn't talk very much about in this video, remaining calm and confident. So your son can push your buttons?
Sure.
I bet you can push his buttons.
Absolutely. In a completely opposite and different way, of course.
I
would argue when it comes to remaining calm and confident that if you can master the second, it's a lot easier to
be the first.
Yeah.